and thank you for a kind introduction and for the invitation to this workshop. I'm Tomasz Stasiak. As was said, I'm working with Professor Łukasz Kurpaska group in our lab. And this is a short outline of my presentation, so I will briefly introduce our laboratory, what we are doing, what type of materials we are studying. Then I will present cases of high temperature nanoindentation of 3 different materials, and then I will give some short conclusion and perspectives. So I work in one of the largest research institutes in Poland. We have over 1,200 employees, many professors and postdocs and senior researchers, also about 80 PhD students. We are working in different fields related to nuclear research. We have also our own nuclear research reactor. We perform some materials investigation after irradiation in nuclear reactor, but also we perform a lot of other stuff not related to nuclear application. We study materials for high temperature application. And the 2 main departments in our institute are a materials physics department and Nomaten Center of Excellence, which collaborate quite well to investigate different types of materials for nuclear and non-nuclear application. And on the map, we are located here near Warsaw, about 35 kilometers from the center in the middle of nowhere in the forest. So we have in our lab, we have several different departments, maybe small divisions. We are focused on, as I said, nuclear materials, but mainly for high temperature applications. So most of our equipment is equipped for high temperature in situ study. For example, for X-ray diffractometer, have in situ holder that can heat up to 1200 degrees C. The same with transmission electron microscope. We have a holder for high temperature studies. We have also for in situ tensile test that we can compare the result from different technique. Also traditional mechanical testing like tensile tests or compression tests, also for high temperature in situ measurements. We perform some tests for industry using, for example, small punch test, which is very interesting from industrial point of view. We have other divisions that collaborate a lot with industry. For example, non-destructive testing. These people are mainly outside the lab in the installation. They study some cracks, for example, in the piping system. We have also, because we are focused on high temperature applications, so we have good thermal property testing division with a very new equipment like differential scanning calorimetry and thermogravimetry and so on. And we collaborate a lot with simulation people that can simulate especially mechanical response of the materials. This is our nanoindentation laboratory. I will not spend too much on this slide because most of us know about this device. We have P5 systems, so very recent. And here in the scientific part, I would like to talk about 3 different examples from 3 different projects. The first one is amorphous alumina coating for generation for nuclear reactors. The paper was published very recently, I think 6 months ago. It's the result of European Gamma project. Another example for high temperature nanoindentation is iron chromium alloys, also for generation for nuclear reactors. And this paper was published last year, so I encourage you to read this paper. And another study which is still ongoing, it's about nickel iron single crystals. It is part of the Preludium project, which is a project of one of our PhD students, and one of the paper was published, but another are in preparation. So I will start with alumina coatings. So this is these coatings are intended to be used in generation for nuclear reactors. So the type of reactors that are currently under design and some prototype are already working. And we are focusing in this project on lead-cooled fast reactor application. With our partner institution, we deposited by pulsed laser deposition technique the thin films of alumina with I think it depends thickness between 5 micrometers to 1 micrometers, and we perform some characterization by SEM and TEM later. And the aim of the project is to evaluate the deposition condition, but also the performance of this coating at high temperature, which is crucial for the future application of this material. So to characterize mechanical response, we perform nanoindentation at room and at high temperature. And of course, I think everyone knows that there's several precautions that should be taken to before performing high temperature nanoindentation. Of course, is environment control. We perform at high purity argon atmosphere. The intender choice is very crucial because, for example, the diamond can oxidize at 400 degrees C, so it's not suitable for high temperature studies. So we perform our nanoindentation with cubic boron nitride indenter. And of course, we should know that there is a thermal drift, so we should be careful after in analyzing also our result. And here is our samples that was attached using this special cement on the hot stage holder. This is the parameter of nanoindentation, and here this is the schematic that was already shown during this workshop, but I would like to say that the temperature is measured in different by thermocouples in different areas. We measure the temperature on the intender, but not on the intender tip, so the temperature could slightly vary between the base on the intender and intender tip, which can have impact on the result. And also we measure on the surface of the sample the temperature. And we perform nanoindentation with different temperature, and we observe that, as expected, the nano hardness decreases with increasing testing temperature, but the Young's modulus is quite stable. There are almost no, maybe this is quite exception, but almost there are no significant changes of the Young's modulus. And what is also important, that we perform a lot of microscopic observation after testing, and in this case we prepared amorphous alumina coating, but after nanoindentation at 650 degrees C we prepared FIB lamella, and on TEM we observed that near the substrate, so the stainless steel, we observed some crystallization of these alumina thin films. So the gradient of temperature in the whole sample is the temperature is not the same in the whole sample. So probably near the substrate the temperature was a little bit higher than in the surface of the thin films where we measured nanoindentation. So this temperature also should be precisely controlled. And to analyze the crystallization behavior of the alumina thin films, we perform grazing incident X-ray diffraction in situ in different temperatures, as you can see in the graph. And we can see that at 650 degrees C, the alumina coating is still amorphous. There are only peaks of the substrate, but at the higher temperature, we see crystallization of the alumina, which is also limiting the application. The temperature is limiting the application of these thin films in the proposed nuclear reactors. And here the simulation group performed some simulation by molecular dynamics to evaluate, to compare the simulated result of nanoindentation with experimental one. And we see that for Young's modulus, the simulated results are quite matching the experiment, but for the hard nanoindentation hardness, the differences are quite big. So I think we should work more about our models of nanoindentation by molecular dynamics. And another example of the study is the study of bulk alloys. We perform on different alloys, mainly martensitic ferritic steels, and also poor iron. And this, especially Eurofer 1907, is a very promising candidate for application in a nuclear reactor in generation 4 and in some part of fusion reactor. And we also perform nanoindentation at room and high temperature using Berkovich intender. And the main objective of this work was to understand the high temperature deformation behavior of these alloys. It's also to evaluate if there are, at some temperatures, there are dynamic strain aging phenomena, also known as Porte-Le Chatelier effect, which can modify the mechanical properties at this temperature. And this is some initial SEM microstructure of these studied alloys. And based on the nanoindentation test, that for most temperature we see decrease of hardness with increasing temperature and also decrease of the Young's modulus. But for some temperature, depending on the alloy, for example, for pure iron, it's at 200 degrees C. For these two alloys, it's at 400 degrees C. There are increase slight for this iron and even higher for the second one of the hardness. And on the these curves, we can see that some burst, and this is probably the dynamic strain aging phenomena. And we perform also STM observation to evaluate the microstructure below the indent, and also with the dwell time longer, we perform some study of creep behavior of these alloys, which are different depending on the composition. And I encourage you to read it on more on this in this paper. And we prepared FIP lamella in the region below intender, and we study dislocation structure after nanoindentation at room temperature and also at high temperature. And we can clearly see that the structure is different, the dislocation structure. We see at high temperature the polygonization of the dislocation, and based on these EBSD maps, we see that even for Eurofer alloy, we have recrystallization of the grains due to the stress and temperature. And we measure the density of the dislocation. And for example, for this Eurofer, we see that there are lower density of dislocation below at high after nanoindentation at high temperature. It's mainly due to the recrystallization. So we are performing a lot of studies like that we are analyzing in detail the microstructure of the alloys after nanoindentation. And the last scientific example of this talk is the nickel iron single crystals. Because in our lab we are performing a lot of ion implantation also to simulate irradiation resistance of the alloys. So in this case we perform we prepare different single crystals, and we perform ion irradiation. And using TEM, we investigate the the density of the defects. We characterize defects such as dislocation loops or stacking fault errors, and here we perform also nanoindentation to evaluate irradiation-induced hardening of these alloys and to compare which has at the end better irradiation resistance. But we also perform on non-irradiated alloys some high-temperature nanoindentation because we expect that depending on the composition, we can have some phase transformation at elevated temperature that can impact significantly the mechanical response of the alloy. And we clearly see that there are increase for especially two alloys with the higher content of iron, the increase of hardness at 500 degrees C. And we perform also XRD and TEM studies, and we can conclude that at this temperature we have the transformation of phases. We have formation of L1 phase and L1 0 phase order phases that can increase the hardness because they block the dislocation. And also we observe some dynamic strain aging on several temperature, especially at 600 degrees C, which is manifested by these bars. And also this is still ongoing work. For the ion implanted samples, we perform a lot of collaboration with simulation group where we model the defects and nanoindentation low displacement curves, and then we perform some TM observation of the defects and how the ion implantation modified the response also during nanoindentation. So for the conclusion of the talk, we perform nanoindentation in different areas. Especially we focus on ion implanted layers, but recently we perform more studies on high temperature nanoindentation. For example, of these alumina thin films and different other alloys like nickel-based alloys. We study also some dual phase alloys. We determine the hardness of different phases in these alloys. But in the future, we'd like to be more focused on high temperature investigation because our lab is also quite good equipped to compare the different properties at these high temperatures. And in the perspective, maybe longer perspective, we plan maybe to upgrade to the very high vacuum system to perform indentation up to 1000 degrees C. And we just started to study some new materials like refractory high entropy alloys, but for now we are mainly studying them at room temperature, but in the future probably in the high temperature. And in the end, I would like to thank some different projects in our lab that where we perform nanoindentation. So there are some national projects from PhD students, from postdoctoral students, and some another source of the financing is the Foundation of Polish Science, which also can fund some projects for young researchers. And we have quite a lot of European research funded projects where in all these projects we perform quite a lot of nanoindentation, and some more oriented on industry, and especially this one which was started like half a year ago in the collaboration with South Korea on the coatings for nuclear reactors. So thank you for your attention. This is the contact details for me, and thank you for the invitation for this workshop.